Hey guys, so we're going to look at our final relationship between enterprise bargaining and the government economic goals. And that relationship is between enterprise bargaining and the equity in income distribution. So, as we know, the government goal of equity income distribution means that everyone has a reasonable standard of living. It doesn't mean that everyone is equal. It doesn't mean that everyone has the same level of income, because that may hinder efficiency. So, it means that everyone has a reasonable living standard. And that's characterized by people having the access to all the needs of survival. So water, food, shelter, clothes, anything you think of that could be a need, and all the different wants that may relate to our daily survival. So like luxury items, say Foxtel, etc. So this equity income distribution goal is so that everyone has a reasonable standard of living. So they're living above the poverty line, but not everyone has the same amount of income. So that's the basic idea. It also means that the top and bottom quintiles should not earn too different an income. And what this means is that, say the top quintile earns $200,000 a year, the bottom quintile should maybe earn $70,000 a year. So the difference isn't like $1 million and $20,000, because that would create social unrest, or it would compromise the cohesion of society. And we've talked about the importance of that in our lecture devoted to the equity, or the government goal of equity and income distribution. So if you want to remind yourself, refresh yourselves of that, I'd encourage you to go back to that lecture under the tab of the government economic goals and go through that video. So let's look at how enterprise bargaining can help achieve equity in income distribution, and at the same time can actually increase this gap between the top and bottom quintiles. So we're going to look at firstly the disadvantages of enterprise bargaining. So in recent years, it actually tended to increase inequality. So we talked about how this actually improves employment in the long run, how it increases incomes, but it does tend to increase inequality. So why does that increase inequality? It's because those with higher incomes tend to have greater bargaining power. Greater bargaining power. Because we relate this idea of enterprise bargaining back to the concept that you get what you put in, and it is only those who have higher incomes who originally were more skilled. So we looked at the labour market graph, and those with their high equilibrium income are often those skilled workers, and there are a small number of these skilled workers, so such as lawyers. So we have the wage and we have labour. So we have, say, such lawyers up here, lawyers, and the equilibrium wage is here, very high, let's say around $100 an hour, and we have a quantity only at L1. So for lawyers we have a very small quantity, but say for cleaners, as a broad generalization, some cleaners may be very skilled, but we have a very high number of qualification, or people who are qualified to become cleaners, at L2, and so as a result we have a very low wage, say $20 an hour. So that's the wage discrepancy. So in fact, because lawyers have higher skills, they have greater bargaining power with their employees. However, with cleaners, because they have relatively lower skills, and because there is such a high supply of cleaners available, they have, of course, limited bargaining power with their employees. So they can't just say, okay, give me $100 an hour and I'll clean 5 times as fast, because the employees wouldn't actually give them $100. They'd actually hire different cleaners who could do the job but at a lower price because of the high number of supply. So these cleaners have less bargaining power, whereas lawyers have high bargaining power. So the wages of those with weak bargaining power in the labour market, such as those unskilled, those blue-collar workers, or these workers who are immobile with their resource, so they can't actually move between different jobs, and industries with low productivity, they tend to fall behind. And these people are often already in low wages. So we have high incomes going even higher, and we have low income earners actually experiencing a situation where their incomes rise by a little amount. So we have this high rise in income here, and we have a really low rise in income for low income earners. So that's how enterprise bargaining can in fact increase inequality between nations. And although this has resulted in an increase in living standards or overall living standards in the economy, it has increased this gap between high and low income earners there. So despite the possible negative effects of labour market reforms or of enterprise bargaining on equity, it is important to note that in the long term, it does actually enforce or help this government goal of equity in income distribution, and possibly most prevalently through this idea that enterprise bargaining helps improve the real income of people, and therefore by increasing the real income, this would actually increase the reasonable living standards, the idea that everyone has a reasonable living standard. So to look at an example, we will see that in the long run, people would tend to, employment rates would actually increase because of this increase in job vacancies. And if you want to remind yourselves of how enterprise bargaining increases employment, I'd encourage you again to look at the lecture between enterprise bargaining and employment. It might just be the previous two lectures. So just pop into the video tabs and look or search enterprise bargaining and for employment, and you come up with the lecture on enterprise bargaining and employment, and you can go through that in more depth. But we know that enterprise bargaining leads to greater employment in the long run, and because people who are employed receive factor incomes, this is a far better rate of income than if people were on transfer incomes by the government. So as a result, overall, as employment increases in the long run, or as structural unemployment decreases in the long run, we will see that people would live a reasonable standard of living because of higher real incomes. And as a result, this would tend to move towards this goal of equity in income distribution. Not because everyone has the same amount of money, but because everyone is living a reasonable standard of living.